All right, welcome to Voice of the Jungle. This is Voice of the Jungle, the podcast, the talk show, whatever you want to call it, the Oprah Winfrey show. I don't care. It is Voice of the Jungle. Right now, you are with Burns, Tyler, Minnick, Tanner. This is the whole crew. We are checking in. This is a horrible time to be a Bengals fan, and currently, I'm regretting my tattoo. There's not a lot else I can say.
You can't say that.
I have not been alive since they've won a playoff game. I'm going to be 30 years old in the next 2 years. I'm 28.
Yeah, who of us here is the oldest?
I'm approaching my 30s. Burns is clearly the oldest.
Okay. And you've never been alive for a playoff win, correct?
Never.
No, I'm 29, and I have not seen a playoff win.
Okay, so jumping right into it, we're gonna jump. So Marvin never brought us a playoff, and we wanted to first talk about the coaching. Marvin never brought us a playoff, but let's go ahead and talk about the playoffs. Burns. No, you're first. Burns, tell me what you think. What do you think is going to get the Bengals to the playoffs? Give me just bullet points of what you think it's going to take to get the Bengals to the playoffs.
So to get to the playoffs, obviously we need a fully healthy Joe Burrow. Whether that means he has to take next year off, if it means we get him back 100%, do it. I think our receivers are fine. Joe Mixon, signing him was good, but I do think we need to we attack the cornerback position. We have to do the offensive line. I'm sick of us having these excuses. We've had a terrible offensive line since 2015. The last year we were actually competitive. That year we were awesome, and there's a reason we started 8-0 with Dalton that year, because he could stand up. So that's what we got to do.
Tyler, what do you think? What's going to bring the Bengals to the playoffs?
I think touching on what Burns said, the offensive line, and you said making excuses. The article that came out from Sports Illustrated yesterday talking about the offensive line coach not willing to make changes because he has his guys. It's clearly not working. Whatever his guys are, it sounds lazy. It's lazy all the way up. There needs to be significant fundamental change in the coaching staff. Secondly, I talked to all three of you about this yesterday. I know you are all in agreement. Zach Taylor's not the way to go. Everyone's got different opinions. I still think it was a mistake not to hire Eric Bieniemy. Look at what he's done in Kansas City. Got the Mahomes jersey on right now. I have family out there, diehard Chiefs fans, and they were terrified he was going to leave. Like you guys all said, he hasn't done a thing. It's all Andy Reid, which is true. Andy Reid's a phenomenal coach. We cannot take credit away from what Eric Bieniemy's done with that offense. I think he leaves, Kansas City's hurting. I think wherever he goes and gets a head coaching job, wins a Super Bowl in 5 years. I think that should have been the right move a year and a half ago when he first interviewed. This conversation came up. What's that?
Where do you think he's going to go?
I have no idea where he's going to go. I mean, I've heard a couple different things. He still wants a head coaching job. He's never done it.
So back to the Bengals. What do you think, key players, player-wise, what do you think is going to bring the Bengals to the playoffs?
An entire new offensive line. That's what we need to focus our draft on. So we need to focus free agency on. I mean, exclusively. From this point on, I don't want to see us signing. Like we signed Shaq McKinney a couple weeks ago. Obviously, that didn't end up working out. But I don't like necessarily going that far out of the way to find defensive backs, defensive ends. That's not what's really holding us back right now. It should be 100% full focus on paying big guys up front to do their job.
I totally agree. Minnick, what do you think?
Okay, so a couple things. I think everybody's in agreement that the offensive line needs to be revamped. I disagree with Tyler in the fact that the whole entire offensive line needs to be picked apart, because I like Trey Hopkins at center and I like Jonah Williams at left tackle. He just needs a little bit more time because, let's face it, this was basically his rookie year.
Correct.
So the guard spots definitely need to be looked at. The best one we probably got there is Suafilo, and he's only played half a season with us, and he was a backup for Dallas. Right tackle definitely needs to be evaluated. I do think we do need to take a look at the defensive ends in the draft. So I will disagree there as well, because we got rid of Dunlop. And we are constantly scrutinized when we're playing games by the analysts as to how little pressure we're getting on the opposing quarterbacks. So I'm gonna take a step back and say we definitely don't need to evaluate making that position better early in the draft or in free agency. But maybe like rounds like 3 and 4, we need to take a good look. But offensive line, yeah, definitely we need to hammer that down with the free agency and early in the draft. And then my last point is there definitely needs to be organizational changes. I'm going to make you guys mad here. I'm not 100% on the fire Taylor bandwagon. I am open to hearing alternatives. So that's the closest you're going to hear me give up on somebody. And the reason I'm going to say this is because one of the questions I was going to bring to this meeting here today was, do you think Joe Burrow would want us calling for Zach Taylor's head?
Yes.
I'm going to
Yes,
go ahead
I
and
don't
say
think he
no.
would admit it publicly, but yes.
No.
If
I think publicly he's going to defend his coach, but if you were to ask him personally, I think you
He
hear about
knows.
this distrust and the lack of communication in this locker room, and you hear that it's coming through the players. There's a complete lack of trust between the coaching staff and the players, and you have to imagine that he feels the same way.
I think there's a complete lack of trust, but I also think that Joe Burrow, this is his first year in professional football. He's played with two different colleges, two elite colleges, but this is his first year in the NFL. He has never been around a Rex Ryan. He's never been around a Pete Carroll. I think this is what he knows so far. Yeah, I'm sure he's been interviewed by every freaking team in the NFL, but this is what he knows. He knows Zach Taylor, and I'm sure that being the number 1 first-round draft pick, you're going to get treated like gold when you walk in that building. So why wouldn't he support Zach Taylor? Why wouldn't he? Even though there's losses, Joe Burrow is going to stand up for his man. That's the guy. Do I agree with that? No. I think Zach Taylor needs to be – now this is where it gets hairy because no head coach is going to take a demotion. But I think Zach Taylor would be better suited in the office somewhere. I don't think he's bad for the Bengals, but I think that he's not right for the head coaching position.
He's not a head coach. That's the whole problem.
Much like Marvin was in his last few years. He should have turned the reins over to Hugh Jackson. We would have been in a totally different boat. Totally different.
See, you're talking about this is the first professional team, obviously, Joe Burrow's played for. He's coming from a college organization. Part of why I think that he has to be frustrated is harkening back to that SI article I keep bringing up from yesterday. It was referred to as, some players were referring to this as more of a college level environment than it was a professional level environment. And it said, one even said that didn't even feel like quite that. Like it's a lower level college environment. Like you said, he's coming from not one, but 2 elite programs. The colleges Burrow's coming from. He's coming from Ohio State to LSU, where he won a national championship, had the best season by a college player in history. I find it hard to believe that the Bengals organization is being run better than those were. It's probably a demotion to him. It's probably a step back coming from the locker room environment he had in Ohio State, in LSU, to coming to this.
So speaking on what's needed in the locker room, Minnick, I want to hear from you. What do you think is needed in the locker room? Not necessarily coaching, not necessarily players. What do you think is needed in the locker room to get this team back on track?
I think camaraderie is a huge part. Like, you got to be having fun playing the game, and then even above that, trust and loyalty. So if we're reading into this article that Tyler keeps bringing up, the
Have you read the article yet?
Missing. Yeah, I did. I read it right after it got sent to me. So my biggest beef with the article is there's no sources mentioned, and I get that, you know, maybe nobody wants to come forward and say their name because they're playing and they're afraid of losing playing time. But like, anytime there's no sources in any sort of news article, that is a red flag. I mean, I guess you can say Carlos Dunlap because he openly
and look where it got
came out and well, he's on a playoff
today.
I understand you can't prove credibility when you don't name your sources, but even it's said in the article, a lot of players are afraid of speaking out because of the repercussions of knowing that they're going to lose playing time. It sounds like
it was also written
about a coach ripping people apart for mistakes while ignoring others. None of these guys want to put that target on their back.
Yeah, but I think the thing is, like, it really all comes down to what you want to believe if you don't hear any sort of sources.
I
So
agree,
I
but
think
like, do
But at
you
the
the
same
believe it?
time,
I
it
mean,
was written by a very,
this-
very reliable and very
Yeah.
reputable reporter. Like
And
Elise
this is
Jesse.
Sports
do you
Illustrated.
doubt any of these things, Matt? I mean, we might not know for
So-
sure it's true, but seeing what we've seen historically in this organization, it's not hard to believe that these are facts. It's not
so
hard to
I
believe that at all.
I'm not gonna like dispute the fact that the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle of Joe Burrow's experience and probably somewhere in between that and Carlos Dunlop's experience. So I definitely believe some of the stuff is going on in the locker room. I'm just doubting to the extent of how terrible it is, because I think the one thing is, like, you definitely have to keep your locker room in check, right? Because on one end you got the Mike McCarthy's of the world where players absolutely disrespect you right in front of your owner. And then on the other hand, assuming that this Bengals article is true, you have us where you have military drill instructors and Jim Turner cussing out athletes, keeping them in check and making them earn their spot. So it's like, I think there's somewhere in the middle that the organization needs to be on. Like, I don't think players should have all the power, and I don't think coaches should have all the power. So that's what I mean when I want to see some organizational changes, whether that be through personnel or just through actions. Like, I don't really care how it happens. I just want it to happen. So like I said,
Very well
I'm just
said.
I'm open to seeing changes being made.
This
Very well
this team
said.
needs
Very well said. Well, hold on, Burns,
This-
and I don't want to cut you off, but I do want to keep moving forward. We've only got about 10 minutes left, and Brendan, specifically, I want to hear from you. I want to know what you think the quarterback situation is going to be. I mean, obviously, we haven't even touched on it. Our golden goose, our bronze statue, Joe, Mr. Daddy Burrow, is out. You took his knee and it went through one of those ninja shredders or like a slap chop. That guy's in prison, but it still hit a slap chop. And it's still like, what are we going to do? Brendan, I want to hear from you. What are we going to do about our quarterback situation?
Well, I think we're going to have to learn real quick how serious the Bengals are about Zach Taylor or not. Because if they're serious about keeping him around, they have to show that he can win with no matter what's thrown in his place. I'm sorry, but Finley and Brandon Allen are not going to get you wins.
Either of
If
the
they're
above.
if they're serious about Zach Taylor, they need to worry about the development of the other players. Like
Is the
Higgins.
goal to win right now?
Well, this
I
year
don't
we're
know.
not.
That's
thinking-
valid.
This year we're
It
not
That's
thinking-
should
valid.
be, but realistically,
But is the goal to win right now? The goal,
It should.
the goal
Well,
right
I
now
think-
is to survive.
Well, I don't think it's fair to the current players that are giving it their all on Sunday if you just flop again. Like we did it last year. How fair is it to Tyler Boyd, who 2 years in a row has balled out despite the quarterbacks?
How fair is it to AJ Green?
the AJ Green, with a
How fair
potentially
is it to
dwindling
AJ Green,
career.
who has spent his entire career, who that guy, if anybody, should be in the Hall of Fame that dude should have just as many rings as Tom Brady.
Is
Taking a team's not
Is
fair
it-
to a guy like that could be winning Super Bowls somewhere else.
and then if we
But less about receivers. Brendan, again, we're getting distracted. Brendan, what do you think about Zach Taylor? And what do you think about, or not Zach Taylor, what do you think about Joe Burrow? Give me real quick, what's Joe Burrow and who's your next pick? What do we do for quarterback?
well, I don't think if we're smart, we're not going to see Burrow until the beginning of the 2022 season. They'll if he's going to come back week 11 next year, what's the point? Have him study defenses and make sure that knee is 100%. If it's 90 by week 10, is it really worth it? We're going to be out of the playoff race unless the only way I see him playing next year is if we sign like a Fitzpatrick or something and we go 5-5 in the first 10 weeks of
Chance
the
for a
season.
wild card run.
Chance for a wild
Okay.
card run when Burrow comes back.
Okay.
Otherwise,
Okay,
we'll sit
so
Burrow.
Tyler, do we sign a Fitzpatrick? Do we get for that magic? What do we do? What do you think?
Yes and no. I mean, like we've all said, we are all on board with a Fitzpatrick or like the phenomenal article Matt wrote, a Colin Kaepernick. I am not opposed to something like that. If we
Phenomenal
need someone
article,
to
by
carry
the
us
way.
in the meantime.
Thank you.
But it's about how aggressive are we willing to be and how much money are we willing to spend. We cannot bankrupt ourselves for a season. If something, I don't even want to use the term falls in our lap, we can go looking for it, but we have to be careful with how aggressive we're going to be about it. Because if it's not in the cards for us to sign a Colin Kaepernick or a Ryan Fitzpatrick, we already know how Mike Brown is about money. Let's be honest. We can't bankrupt ourselves to find someone for the year. So it really just depends on what situations arise and what makes sense for the organization without leaving ourselves completely desolate until he's back. I don't trust in Ryan Finley, and I certainly don't trust in Brandon Allen. Until today, I didn't even know who Brandon Allen was, to be completely honest.
And now he's our starting quarterback.
So we need to go elsewhere, but we cannot. We can't be too aggressive.
What about
Very
like
well
a?
said. Well, hold on. I
like
want to hear from Minnick. I want to know what Minnick has to say because Minnick has been blowing up the group chat. And for obviously the 4 people watching this or the 5 people, I don't care. Minnick has been blowing up the group chat with information that is, I mean, this dude's throwing diamonds out. This guy's throwing diamonds on the middle of the street. And yeah, sure, some of the tarmac is being thrown up, but hey, he's throwing diamonds. Minnick, what are we doing for QB? What are we going to do with Joe Burrow?
So first things first, we have $10 million in cap space left for this year. And I actually did that research before I wrote the article cap space. So I think honestly, like you really could go out and get Kaepernick to even finish out this season. I don't know if it'd be the smart move by any stretch of the imagination because he wouldn't have a lot of time to look at the playbook. But then again, is it going to be smart to roll him out week 1 next season? And then he doesn't have as much chemistry with the players as he would have if you would sign him at the tail end of this season. Like if you're going to legitimately try and maybe go for a wild card next year. Now, a lot of things have to work if you're going to make that happen. Like you have to draft well this year. You have to do free agency this year, probably spend a little bit more money in free agency than you're comfortable with. You probably have to let AJ Green walk because franchise tagging him again, we're going to have less than $10 million in cap space next year, probably.
That's a really good point.
But I think I think it might have been Brendan who was mentioning Boyd and Higgins. Is it fair to hold back their development? And I think if you let AJ Green go and you have that available cap space to sign a bridge quarterback like that, like him or Fitzmagic we were talking about, I think that it would do great things for the morale of the team as well as the fans. And then, you do actually open up the possibility of Burrow playing later in the year. Now, that being said, if they're in a position where they can switch from Fitz to Tua, kind of like a Fitz to Burrow, kind of, if you see what I'm saying here, I would only want to see that happen if it could happen with a couple weeks to go in the regular season, because I don't want to see a cold bore shot, so to speak, which is basically like a first shot out of a rifle that's really inaccurate if we don't have any shooters watching. I don't want to see a cold bore shot Burrow straight out of the gate here in the playoffs. Like I don't want him to see him getting his feet under himself in the first game of the playoffs. And then like he has the taste of the first playoff loss that way. That would be terrible. So that's the only way I'd want to see Burrow next season. But yeah, I mean, just kind of getting back to the main point of things, I would love to see us take a shot at a bridge quarterback.
All right. Awesome. Well, guys, we are at our time. This has been 30 minutes. So this is the Voice of the Jungle, just a midweek update. Guys, seriously, this is hard time to be a Bengals fan. There's ups and there's downs, and then there's Joe Burrow putting his knee in a meat slicer, and that's where we sit. So thank you, everybody, for listening in. This has been Voice of the Jungle. We'll be back soon. You're going to hear more from us. This is not it. This is not it. This is not the end of it. This is not over, because this is Voice of the Jungle, and we are working on becoming the biggest and the baddest and the best in the Bengals business. I'm looking for alliteration, y'all bum boys with y'all bum bees, with your bum bitches, because that's what we are. Voice of the Jungle, guys. Everybody have a good night. Happy Thanksgiving. Yes.
Do we have a Twitter handle yet?
Who
If you
dey?
figured one out, go ahead and
Oh,
shout
yeah,
that
Twitter
out, let
handle.
people
Shit.
know where it's at.
I'm a great hyper, but I'm a terrible typer. So Voice of the Jungle, look on, what is it? We are Real VOTJ on Twitter at REAL VOTJ. Real Voice of the Jungle, Real VOTJ. Minnick, shout your handle out real quick.
VOTJ _ Minnick.
All right, Tyler, what's yours?
I'm checking. I just changed it. It's at Ty VOTJ.
All right, Brendan, where do we send the smoke signals to?
He had to play me on that one.
Who
All
day?
right, guys. Who day?
Who
We
dey?
out.
Who dey?
Who dey?
Who day?